welcome to everyone that's here. So I'm Roy Harrow, so I'm the chair of this group, so great to have people here. The purpose of this group is to try and help bring together the world of applications development and the world of security very, very loosely, and to help people who are coming at it from, say, the security side, which is my background, to understand the world of application development and what engineers, developers, whatever we call them these days, have to do, and to help the people on the development side understand why security is essential to everything they do from the beginning, not the end. So we are really fortunate to have Vince here tonight. So Vince will introduce himself, I'm absolutely sure. And Vince has got some great experience in this world of what we call now DevSecOps. So he's going to tell us quite a bit about that. If you have any questions either online or in person, if you're online, please raise them on the chat. If you have them in person, what we'd rather do is wait for those to come towards the end. So try and make a mental note of it, right on the back of your hand or whatever, and then we'll take those towards the end. If you think Vince has said something that's really offensive and we have to sort it out there and then, we'll deal with that. Okay. So I'm sure we can deal with any scenario that comes up. So thank you very much and welcome, and I'll hand over to Vince.
Thank you very much, Roy. Welcome. I've changed the title of the presentation. It was called originally Moving to the Cloud Securely with DevSecOps. As I was rewriting this, but that was last year's presentation. This is new for 2023, so these are all very lucky, and these are also guinea pigs. So any feedback will be welcome. So first of all, we go to a lot of these things and you go, "Who's this talking to me now?" This is me. I'd like to call this my winter coat. So I'm growing it out, but I haven't grown it out. We'll be back in summer. So my name's Vince King. I work at the Bank of England. I have been in the bank for almost 10 years. Now, people approach me and go, 10 years, that's a long tenure. Within that 10 years, I've had a lot of different roles. I've worn a lot of different hats. I always start these things by saying I'm a reformed developer, just to make sure that I've got, never mind all the stickers that I have, that I've got that credibility behind me. I was a developer, SME, ops lead, DevOps SME. I created the DevOps capability within technology within the bank. And then 4 years ago, I said, stuff all that, I'm going over to cybersecurity. So I've been in cybersecurity for almost 4 years, started collecting all of the certifications, all the stickers. Most recently, what I'm most proud of is last week I became a chartered fellow of the BCS. After a lot of back and forth and proving who I was. All of these things, I typically get asked, do stickers matter? Do certifications matter? And that's a whole other rant. For me, it was a very personal thing to validate my experience. But anyway, now I lead the effort for DevSecOps within the bank. And I'm going back to the people that I used to work closely with, the developers, and kicking them in the shin, saying, it's right that you're using all the good things that I created 6 years ago, but now we need to be more secure. Quick mention of what this presentation is, and probably more importantly, what it is not. This will be a quick overview of what DevSecOps is, what it should be, how we can improve, what we have to change to become better at it, and a few things that you can take away with you. What it is not, it's very important, is a list of solutions for you. It's not going to give you the silver bullet where you can leave here tonight, go into work tomorrow morning, and do DevOps, do DevSecOps. So a little about the bank. It's quite well known. We're 327 years old, then about. We do the official bank rate, which I'm sure everyone's very familiar with. You can see the uptick in that. I will say, and I put this on here specifically, don't ask me about bank rates. Me speculating about bank rates is like doing a maths exam blindfolded. I'll not get anywhere close. We also do banknotes. These are specimens of the ones that will be coming later, I think later this year, next year. We started with the £5, we move up to the 50s. We just completed the 50s actually, last year, the year before. But most importantly, we have this thing called RTGS. I put this on here to show the type of challenges that we have within the bank. RTGS is the real-time gross settlement system. If you haven't heard of it, don't be embarrassed, don't be surprised. But if you've ever paid using CHAPS, BACS, Visa, credit card, it all goes through this system. On average, the bank settles interbank transactions of £720 billion a day. Our maximum was last September, on the last day of September, and we settled £1 trillion in a single day. It's a very closed system, got a lot of security around it, but it's one of the areas that we have to contend with DevSecOps on a daily basis. So, what is DevSecOps? We all know what DevSecOps is. We've all read the blogs, we've all read the books. It's small teams working independently on their features, validating correctness in pre-production environments, with deployments happening to production throughout the day, securely, safely, and reliably. But in reality, that doesn't really happen. And a lot of the time, security is the blame. Now, having been in the dev and the ops, I can understand this. As a developer, I didn't understand why I couldn't have full admin rights on my local machine. I'm Vince, you can trust me. I'll install things. Might be a bit dodgy, I might get code from unorthodox areas, but I'm well-intentioned, not malicious. So I saw them as stifling my creativity. As a DevOps person, they were stopping me being the best version of myself. I wanted to do deployments hundreds of times a day. Netflix, Microsoft, all these big giants. But they wouldn't let me have admin rights on all our estate machines so I can run unsigned PowerShell scripts to do my deployments. They just said no. As operations, they stopped me getting the stuff that I needed for my business stakeholders. They were always the department of no. And very often, that's true. And it comes down to one of the most important things to take away from this presentation or any that you hear about DevOps is culture. If you want to play along here at home, see how many times I mention the word culture in this presentation. So we have the situation where security is seen as an impediment. And we have to make sure that if we're to do this correctly, security as a division, as an effort, have to be collaborative and get involved earlier and throughout the life cycle. Easier said than done. But where should security live? We all know it's DevSecOps, or if you go to a SOC, a Security Operations Center, they are OPSEC, you've got AppSec, you've got all these. In my opinion, should live everywhere. Sec, DevSec, OPSEC. Someone said, it'll never catch on, it's too long. I said, it's fine, I'll get it printed on a t-shirt, it'll look great. And it did. But it is important. Just saying DevSecOps, nothing against the DevSecOps at the BCS, it's the title we're all used to, but it's giving the impression that it lives in one place, and that isn't right. It has to get in early and persist through the whole life cycle. Security, for me as a developer, used to be like testing. I'd written all my code, and then some tester came along and told me it was wrong. I got my backup, became defensive, of course, I'm infallible. There's nothing wrong with my code. The similar thing is happening with security. Security is coming in too late, doing a pen test, and saying, you can't go live. Now, one of two things happens. The pen testers, security get listened to, and it doesn't go live. Things get delayed, companies lose money. Or, and I think you can see where I'm going here, we accept the risk and we move on. Promises of, we'll fix this later, rarely come through. And it's not the developer's fault. Their backlog is getting longer and longer every day. When it's a business-driven decision, businesses will ask for a button to change color rather than mandatory technical improvements. Because for them, that's what matters. So we, as security professionals, as DevSecOps, as DevSecOps professionals, we have to get in earlier. And that is part of the culture of engaging with developers at an early stage. But it can become overwhelming, as we'll see in a bit. So zooming in on the cyber point of things, a lot of recognizable names up here. August 2019, GitHub was being sued in the US, and it listed Capital One in the lawsuit because Capital One was storing personal information, social security numbers in the US, in their Git repository. October 2019, Starbucks left an API key exposed in their version control. The first thing I should say is we're all comfortable with what version control is. We all use, I don't care what version control you use, even Visual Source Safe, as long as you use version control. If it's not version control, it doesn't exist. More recently, you've had Nissan, who lost a lot of private code, and just last year, in December, it was very busy, we had Okta, Slack, and PayPal all suffer breaches because of version control issues. PayPal was credential stuffing following a phishing attack. Okta, again, Okta and Slack were very similar, stolen private tokens from the repository. Okay, you see the thing that joins all of these breaches and all of these companies. Humans. Developers, like me, with the best intentions, did something and it wasn't quite right. And it didn't get caught. The developer didn't realize, no one of the peers realized, none of the tooling or processes realized, and API keys ended up in a repository. And I'm a huge fan, as I say, of version control, but version control lives forever. If you've ever accidentally put something in version control, the point of version control is a time machine. If you accidentally delete it, you can go back days, weeks, months, years, and you can retrieve that bit of information. So if you put something in, it's incredibly difficult to purge that. So all of these incidents come down to human error. Accidental or malicious, I'll let the courts decide. What do we need to do? In my experience, developers typically fall into an 80-20 split. This is the human nature. You've got two types of people, A and B. The 80% are the 9 to 5. They work for a company. Any company that is more than a year old will now have legacy software of any kind. You don't have to be 327 years old to have huge monoliths. Things get built and get built on, and extensions get bolted onto the side. Things get bigger than we can ever imagine. But those 80% developers, they're our bread and butter. They turn up every day, they add features, they fix bugs, they do the good work. So we have to support them as security professionals. We have to go along, give them some basic security training. I run a secure coding workshop, and it's simple. OWASP Top 10. Hopefully everyone is familiar with that. I'll mention it again slightly later, but OWASP Top 10 is the 10 most common vulnerabilities found in web applications based on research by an open foundation. but just teaching them about that, then they are slightly more aware. But again, these 9 to 5 developers may have some reluctance saying, I know what I'm doing, there's a Venn-shaped hole in that company, I fill it perfectly, just leave me alone. So you have to fight that culture. We have to improve things from the start. Simple things like code reviews, peer reviews. If you write a bit of code, and the thing that I see in so many organizations that I go to is that code reviews don't happen because there's 1,000 lines of code to review. Now, writing 1,000 lines of code can be difficult. Reading through 1,000 lines of somebody else's code can be demoralizing. So putting in a culture of smaller, more regular changes means that code reviews can be a matter of seconds or minutes, not hours or days. SaaS and DaaS tools, again, are incredibly useful. But turning things like this on will again disenfranchise a lot of developers because all of a sudden their perfect bit of code is throwing up a lot of errors. Again, approaching through education and awareness programs, this can be more inclusive. I always say when I was writing a bit of code and doing code reviews and DaaS and SaaS reviews, my main goal was give pen testers nothing to find. That's hugely important because by the time the pen testers come in, they find something that could be a showstopper. But those 80%, they need guidance, they need strict policies, they need guardrails. They need to be able to operate, but within a safe and comfortable play area. Code reuse, there's statistics anywhere from 50% to 90% of all code written today is not written by your developers. It's about dependencies, packages, importing other people's work. Now, as a developer, I freely admit, could we turn the camera off for a second? That I have scraped code, and it was many years ago, if that code still in existence, I'm really sorry. I've scraped code from the internet that seemed to do what I wanted it to do, and it seemed to work. Did I know and inspect every line of that code? No. Black box coding. Today we have that, but they're called packages. So I don't have to scrape the code, and I just do one line include. But where do we get these policies and things from? Well, that's the 20%. The 20% are the developers that will go out and find the new technologies. They're pushing the envelope. They come to you and say, I want to use these new languages. Not very well established, not very well understood. God only knows who's going to support them if they leave. But we keep them engaged and we say, okay, what's the purpose of it? What does it do that other language can't do? It's engaging with them. And more importantly, it's not just saying no. So these 20% are more proactive. They typically go out, they're reading blogs, sometimes they're the people that give me the hard questions. Questions that I have to go and Google to get them the answer. Thank God for ChatGPT these days. But with the 20%, we have a great opportunity. Because they're proactive, because they're hungry, because they want the new stuff, because they want to use new packages that you may not allow into your organization by default, you can give them a higher level of trust. But that trust comes at a cost. Engage them as secure coding champions. A rising tide lifts all ships. If they find something and they can prove that it's good and it's safe and it's worthwhile, then they will inform the other 80%. Now, I have a misguided notion probably that I can walk into a group of developers and command some kind of respect because I used to be one of them. But now with my security hat on, I would just as easily be dismissed. But one of their own, telling them what to do will go much further. Again, they don't get to play willy-nilly, just going out and grabbing stuff. They have slightly more rights on their laptop. They may have a special area within a cloud that they can innovate. And that's the important thing. They do get to feel that they're innovating. But the trust to be earned. using packages that normally we wouldn't use, they get to use them first. And then we release them into the wild, the general population. Similar with container images. The use of containers is sweeping. Everywhere, everyone's doing them these days. If you're not doing containers, you're kind of almost shunned these days. But they can use your images. And they can, again, be the guinea pigs for that. But using them to go back in and educating the other 80% is invaluable. And more important than that, it actually takes the workload off of the security division. Because if there's some questions, they can go and be the first point of contact. They can triage a lot of stuff before it even gets to the likes of me. That in-depth knowledge. So, culture, culture, culture. Second scary slide. I can give you the sources of these if you want. The interesting one, the 61% was of CISOs that were asked what made it difficult to remediate vulnerabilities. 61% said use of third-party code. So this comes back to our reuse. We can all remember Log4j. Whether it affected you directly or indirectly, it was all over the news. And it's that third-party risk. If you haven't heard about third-party risk, you must be living under a stone. I am tortured with it all the time these days because it's not good enough for me to understand what the package I'm using is a dependency. I need to now understand the dependencies of that package all the way down almost to the source code. The second one, I love. New ways of working. So we're all trying to be agile, we're all trying to do DevOps, we're trying to do all these exciting new things. But in some respects, development is moving faster than security can keep up. And security ends up being reactive. So getting in earlier, engaging with each of the divisions gives us foresight of what's coming on. I mentioned the WASP top 10 earlier. Veracode, who are a code scanning company, if you haven't come across them, scanned 130,000 applications, and they found that 68 of them had a security flaw in the WASP top 10. Now, those could be packages, they could be vulnerabilities that hadn't been patched. One of these things are low-hanging fruit for developers, and these are the things that annoy me when pen testers find them. So what do we do? So I'm not giving you the whole solution, I'm giving you guidance. CI/CD pipelines, that's why we're all here, DevOps. Whether that CI/CD pipeline is a fully automated end-to-end, cradle-to-grave code, or it's a set of well-documented manual steps. Both can be a pipeline. Both are important. But the important bit of the manual bit is well documented. It can't just be ad hoc. Paul can't just come in, do his stuff, can copy and pray deployments anymore. With the manual processes, they can be replaced slowly over time with automation, with tooling, with processes. You don't have to go from 0 to 100 in a year. The big companies take 10 years. Trust but verify. Trust your developers, especially the 20%, the high trust virtual group, but verify what they're doing. And again, a lot of this comes down to processes, a lot of it comes down to tooling. You can search for dependencies, you can query your code for vulnerabilities. There's a lot of vendors out there that will happily sell you the solution. But I haven't found one that does it all yet. Infrastructure as code, I love, because it is having a huge impact in the IT industry. No longer are network engineers sitting and now going for a walk and kicking a bit of tin that's in the basement. They are writing bits of code that does this infrastructure. But one thing that they don't really appreciate is that it's code. This code needs to be treated like your most sacred data or source code. it has to have version control, it has to have checks and balances, trust and verify. Too often we see incidents where some company doesn't realize that they have had a Bitcoin miner running in their cloud instance for a month until they get the bill. Because someone has altered a bit of code and got it through into production. Challenge non-standard architecture. Now, we talk a lot about cloud. We had a discussion earlier about moving to the cloud, and there is almost a sway of smaller and medium enterprises that are coming away from cloud because it's too expensive. I see it more and more. You spin something up in the cloud, where we all rush to the cloud for the benefits, cost savings. It's going to be hosted, across multiple availability zones. You've got resilience. But if you're lifting and shifting your standard VMs from on-prem to the cloud, you're not appreciating the benefit of cloud. But you can't just, and don't get me wrong, there will always be instances where lift and shift is the only option. But efforts must be put in to create a training structure, a culture of utilizing, if not containers, then go all the way and use cloud native resources, because that's the benefit of the cloud that we're looking for. With the 80-20 split, the 20 I was talking about some container images. Again, gold container images, I'm seeing more and more vulnerabilities in container images. If you're moving VMs, you own that VM. You still have to support and maintain that. You can shift that into the middle for the security, but you still have to curate any images and make sure that they're secure so you're not pushing a vulnerable image up to start with. And I think one of the most important ones, and this is the one that will stop you getting pelted with keyboards as you walk through developers, don't break every build. As a security expert, I could go and I could buy all the tools and technology, turn them all up to 11, and every build would stop. No, that's not being an enabler. That is being that dev shall not pass that we saw earlier. So start small. Typically, put the tooling in, put it in audit mode, if there's such a thing, and just record the results. And then just slowly turn it on. Again, developers being drip fed these things, get used to it, and eventually new projects can be turned up to 11 immediately, and everything will be effective. Scary slide number 3. We talked about owning a VM, and I remember the last time I provisioned a machine. After filling out all the forms, putting little black or brown envelopes on the right desks, giving a blood sample, I finally got my server. And it's probably still running now. I love that server. I kept it alive, but it was my responsibility. And that responsibility is getting heavier and heavier. Last year alone, there were 25,226 vulnerabilities and CVEs, common vulnerability enumerations. You can see only 3.4%, I think it is, were classified critical. And those, as a cyber professional, those are the ones you go after first. But those are serious. Those are headline makers for the likes of me. 57% in another survey reported breaches could have been prevented by installing an available patch. Now, we don't have to go too far back. We think about the NHS. On WannaCry, that patch was available for almost a year. And 34% vulnerability existed but couldn't take any action because patching a server can take over 100 days for some organizations. So what do we do? I mentioned my beloved server that I got created. And one of the things that I love most about the cloud, one of the biggest benefits, is the build and destroy and rebuild. As I say, when I got the server, I loved it. I cared for it, I fed it, When it was ill, I patched it. I had full control over it. I treated it like a pet. Now there's this wonderful concept, pets versus cattle. I treated mine like a pet. Took it to the vet, got it shots, got everything it needed to keep it alive. But when we move to the cloud, we should be treating these things like cattle. If one gets ill, dispose of it, give another. It serves a wonderful purpose. When I got into cyber, I was overwhelmed with all the vulnerabilities and breaches and hacks and things that people do. And it's amazing, if you hear of any breach or any ransomware, that is typically the last thing in a series of attacks. If a ransomware is being demanded, it's not too late. It's much, much too late. Hackers have been in your systems for months, if not longer. And not just one, it can be two. There's an instance most recently, a particular company got a ransomware attack, and when they dug into it, it was actually their information, their data had been encrypted 3 times by 3 separate attackers. Because their vulnerability was so widely known, one attacker went in, encrypted it, thought, that's it, I'm going to get paid. Someone went in, encrypted their encryption, and a third went in and encrypted their encryptions. So how's this destroy and rebuild going to help us? If something only lives for 7 days, it means that the window of opportunity for hackers is 7 days. Hackers will invest months trying to get into a system. If they only have 7 days and then they have to start again, it's going to be less appetizing. So again, whether you're on-prem or in the cloud, specifically in the cloud, continuous monitoring is incredibly important. And vulnerability management typically go hand in hand. I have a whole rant about what you need for vulnerability management and cloud security posture management. The important thing to understand is that the ephemeral nature of cloud resources makes it quite difficult to do this vulnerability management on your own. So you will need help. AWS, Azure, GCP, they will give you some information, but typically it's not enough. Continuous monitoring will alert you anytime you have a severe vulnerability, like the CVEs, like the 860 that happened last year, and give you the ability to fix them. But those can't be done in isolation. One of the big things is a culture of feedback. Whoever sits down and gets an email about this vulnerability on this machine can't keep it to themselves. If it's the SOC, if it's a vulnerability management team, they have to inform developers, operations teams, business owners. If it doesn't get fixed, the second, third, fourth hackers may get in. That's where posture management reporting comes in. We generate so much data these days, so much data, and it can be overwhelming. Turning on these tools to 11 typically puts people off and drives people away from DevSecOps. So understanding what metrics you're going to use, what you're going to report, and what trending you're going to identify, again, for your organization is hugely important. Proactive patching for those instances where you cannot get away from VMs, lift and shift, you still own that responsibility. IaaS is a cloud capability, but it is just a new location for your data center. One of the best things to always hang people out to dry is policy compliance. If you set the policies based on evidence, don't just come up with them in the middle of the night after a few drinks. Look at the evidence, set policies of what's good and what's bad, and hold people accountable to them. Now, the next 2 slides, as you've probably seen, my slides are quite minimalistic. These are 2 anti-slides that I have, but they serve a very good purpose. How do we do DevSecOps? So you can see a lot of here, not that you should be reading it, of the things that we have talked about today. But this is typically what puts people off. People see this and go, I'm never going to be able to do that, so I won't do anything. gets worse. These are the tools that are available to do all those things. And again, it's abridged. This isn't a comprehensive list. Some are paid for, some are free. You can do everything open source. You can pay hundreds of thousands, if not millions, for services. But this is why we have to start small. Choose one area, whether it's culture, tooling, turn it on, communicate it, and then get feedback on it. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, try something else. Because if something is causing an impediment to developers, they'll just jump the whole thing. So, like to finish up, I'll promise you something to take away with you. If you're leaving here today and you want to do DevSecOps, here's 5 things that you can start with. Use the benefits of the cloud. Don't lift and shift where you can. Now, as I often repeat, it could involve redesigning and re-engineering an application to be serverless functions using APIs. But that will make it more manageable and future-proof. It is worth the investment. Automate everything. From infrastructure as code, policy as code, deployments as code, can all be codified. But those automations and that code has to be protected like your most private data. And any manual processes that still exist, just make sure they're as secure as possible and well documented. Set policies and control and enforce them through automation. So I can wake up in the middle of the night and say, I want every check-in to my code repository to have a dependency check. That's absolutely fine. But just make sure that that policy is well communicated and developers know that you're turning it from audit to active. Just mentioned reporting compliance. Holding up individuals to account will alienate everyone. Whereas if you give things on a compliance basis, you comply with this policy, but you're not complying with that policy, it gives people more ambitions to improve. Finally, tooling can't fix everything. Go to conferences, go to vendor meetings, but understand that so many institutions and companies that I've seen spend a lot of money on a tool, put it in at great cost, use it for a short time, and then people forget about it. It's about people and process, and those need to be invested in. Comes back to our culture. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm on LinkedIn. Please like and subscribe. I blog sometimes. I would be remiss if I did not take David's advice and say, if you're not a member of the BCS, become a member of the BCS. It's very fulfilling. You get out what you put in, and we're recruiting. So I'm open to any questions.
Brilliant. Okay. So first of all, thank you very much. It was nice to have something nicely succinct and, as you say, not huge numbers of slides and simple slides. So that's good. It makes it easy for people to take away. So thank you for that. I've just asked the people online if you have any questions, please raise those through the chat. I'll keep an eye on that in a minute. I had a few observations of myself, and then perhaps we'll come round to perhaps people in the room. You were talking about your 5 tips. Could you perhaps bring those up?
Oh, now you're challenging technology here, Roy. There we go.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So would it be possible perhaps just to sort of expand? I think these are really important, and I think it would be great if people could be really, really clear what each of these towers here mean. So you're talking about the benefits cloud platforms give us. It might not be obvious to some people what you mean by that statement. What can you give us some examples? The
best analogy that I've seen was the pizza chart. Now, it is a sliding scale from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS. So IaaS, you own the server. PaaS, you have the platform software service on the right hand side. If that's a pizza, your IaaS is you go into the supermarket, buying the dough, buying all the ingredients, taking it all home, rolling out the dough, and making it yourself. The middle one is you buy a ready-made pizza and you cook it at home. The SaaS solution is ordering Domino's. Now, that is a very simple analogy to show how much effort you have to put into something. So the benefits that you get, the further you can move to the right of that pizza scale, the easier things are going to be to support and maintain. Because having either containerization or cloud native resources removes those 860 vulnerabilities that you need to care about, especially if they're OS based or there's specific inclusions that can be captured during pipelines. So that's one of the simplest benefits.
Okay, so I think what you're saying there is to sort of continue with your pizza analogy is, whilst it might be great, if you've got the time, and family who enjoy getting involved in doing some cooking, to get together, get the ingredients together and make the dough yourself, prove it, all of those things. You need time to do that. You need the experience. You need to know what you're doing so you don't poison yourself, so you get the right ingredients. And you can learn through doing that, but it does take time. It takes experience. You won't necessarily get the same result each time, but if you're doing home cooking, that's fine. Yeah.
No, I disagree because and this is controversial because the pizza, that's where the pizza analogy falls down, because I enjoy making pizza at home, but I do not enjoy installing a manifest for antivirus on 32 servers that I now own.
Absolutely. So I was going to go on to, so that's what I was going to go on to. So if you're happy with doing that for making your pizza, that's fine.
Yeah.
You might want to do that with your server in your understairs cupboard at home for playing with, if you've got the time. And I think some people say they like to have their own equipment at home to learn on. And you had your server, and you're talking about the hell trying to keep that server patched, because it takes time and you've got the risks. If that server isn't running anything critical, no one can get to it, doesn't matter. But if that server's running a line of business system that an organization is dependent upon, perhaps that's not right, So we then need to move on and say, well, we need to be moving up the scale and say, okay, perhaps we need to get Domino's in, or the equivalent of Domino's.
This is my instance of there will always be a need for lifting and shifting, but you should limit that as much as possible.
Exactly. So making use of pre-built components, pre-built services is one of the things that you'd call upon within looking at the cloud. And so therefore, and I think that's a great thing, because I think when people looked at the cloud, as the cloud services have evolved, a lot of people said, well, what's the point of this thing called the cloud? I can do it myself. And there was a great deal of concern. Is cloud secure?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people today say, well, actually, it might be more secure than your own data center in many, many cases.
If you've ever seen some of the installations that the CSPs have, they are Fort Knox. But don't get me wrong,
so that's great.
That number one is not by no means easy, because you have to start at the far left of that DevSecOps sec, because it's changing the mindset of the developers. They have to have the skills to actually develop.
So the world is different, is what you're saying. Yeah.
One of the great instances that we had was infrastructure as code. Network engineers are very tactile people. They like going down, messing with cables, and they like to be able to put their hand and give an old punch to a router that isn't acting like they should. All of a sudden, all of these things are virtual, and they can't go and kick anything. And it's a change in mindset. They're no longer network engineers. You're an IT professional. And having that change in culture and concepts is hugely important.
Okay. Can we go on to the next tower that you got there, bad automation?
Yeah.
So can you give some examples of maybe what is it that's stopping people doing that, first of all?
It's people like me going in and turning things up to 11, because that automation, either a typical example is dependency checks on code. How far down the rabbit hole do you go? Where does your liability for third-party risk finish? If I'm including a dodgy little package, hack me easy in my code, well, that's on me. But if it's coming from, well, for Jay, a one-man band who hasn't updated anything in a few years because he didn't think he had to. That automation comes in and starts to break builds. And that is destructive and will be in the wider scheme of things. It's working with the developers to introduce these things at a slow boil.
So I was going to ask a question, which is how do you test the automation? And I think what you've said is you do it slowly, you introduce it slowly.
So anything that has an audit mode is hugely important, because you put it into audit, you start to get the data through saying, if this was live, it would have broken all of these builds.
Yeah.
In the drawer.
Yeah, in the top.
The threshold up to 9s and 10s for the CVEs. Don't go for the 1s and 2s. No one's going to appreciate you for that.
And I've heard a similar thing talked about with some security tools where you get, say, security monitoring tools. Now, it's not quite the same because we're talking about a different area of using security tools where you've got lots of settings and you might say, well, let's just turn on all of the alerts.
Yeah.
And you just get flooded with too much information and you get confusing information. And so I think what you're saying is, by all means, use the automation, but do it step by step.
Bear in mind that
everything at once.
Bear in mind, developers are not security experts.
No.
Unless you have a huge security team that you can devote to support those developers, to give them the education to be able to triage some of these vulnerabilities on their own, so they're not constantly coming to a security professional to get those answers. That's where that 20%, the virtual team of security champions, is hugely valuable.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And then the next two, to my mind, seem sort of complementary in that you were talking about policies and controls that enforce, but almost before that, you might want to do the policies and controls which are just doing the alerting and the auditing, which is part of your compliance reporting. So I think that seems pretty straightforward. And policies and controls that enforce, I think for a lot of organizations would be quite a mature step, because you're actually trusting in that technology now to actually change something.
Policies are high level. Typically, they're the visionary. They're what we want to be, and it's the standards and controls that are actually enforcing those policies.
Okay.
Policies don't need to be complicated. You could have a policy: don't get breached. Now, that is I've seen that policy written down somewhere. Now, that is so vague that it can be implemented anyway. But everything that is done with a control or a standard, put into code or some automation that helps that, is all positive. That could be checking your dependencies, scanning your code for secrets, API keys, anything like that. You don't have to be Netflix, Microsoft, or Google in the next 6 months. We hold these giants up as the gold standard, but we forget that it took them 10 years to get to that gold standard. They fell over a lot, they tried things, they share a lot. Capital One, I mentioned at the very start, they share a lot of their code and a lot of their security tools, open source these days, because they've been through the ringer, they've been through a lot. Standing on the shoulders of giants isn't a bad thing.
Okay, we've got a question from the people online. Do you want to just maybe read that? Is that okay, or is that?
Which one are we doing? This one. What factors we should consider assess where there is a vulnerability in a library that the business critical, and saying no is not really an option. So this is a great topic. It always comes down to the business. Ransomware. I heard a story. I was talking to a guy from the National Crime Agency, the NCA, who works in the cyber division, was talking about ransomware. And of course, it's not enshrined in law at the moment, but paying ransoms could soon be illegal in UK law. But I was asking him outright, and he was very vague because he dodged the question quite deftly. Should you pay a ransom? And I went, well, it's not for me as the NCA, he said, to say that. It's not you as a security professional. It's not someone as a CISO to say, that is now the decision of the CFO. That is a business decision. So to answer the question, the vulnerability, it's all about risk. Security loves a bit of risk. As a developer, I didn't care. I was a bit gung-ho, but I've become more risk averse as I've got into security. And at the end of the day, someone needs to own that risk. As cyber professionals, as developers who have seen something, if we don't get the support to fix something, someone needs to own that risk. And it's an awful thing, but get a signature to make sure that you raised awareness and it was rejected. Risk acceptance as opposed to tolerance.
Yeah, but by the right risk owner.
Oh yeah, you can't get Joe Bloggs to sign off on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got it, and I think sometimes people don't understand that. Okay, so we've just had another question here about where to start.
I think you starting factor topic that you might start with and to talk to a group of developers about starting to implement DevSecOps. I can't say it enough. Start small. Choose one thing. If that is reading about the OWASP Top 10 and sharing that with the rest of the developer community, that helps. If it is investing in a tool or using open source, look for secret scanning. GitLab, GitHub, any version control will have free plugins that will do these for you. These are the things that we don't want penetration testers to find. We want them to be bored. So start small, introduce one thing, evaluate it. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, get rid of it and move to the next thing.
Something you mentioned earlier, it was a different slide, where you said the rebuild, 7-day rebuild.
Yes.
So that's not a policy I've heard of.
Yeah, do people understand what that meant? Maybe it's worth just expanding. on
Okay,
that.
so
Yeah.
the destroy and rebuild.
This was about your cattle and pets, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
My cattle and pets. So you love a pet and you dispose of cattle. So if we are doing this properly, if you are mature enough to be looking at infrastructure as code, if you're using, and there are other tools available, but Terraform is a very popular one, Ansible for configuration of servers. It's a matter of pressing a button to create assets in the cloud or even on-prem with virtualization. If you have the culture within your organization to redeploy applications more than twice a year, if you can do it once a day, once a week, once a month, then it gives you the ability to tear down that whole environment and rebuild it from scratch at a few moments' notice. Not only does it help with disaster recovery, but it also gives you the ability to have this cadence where every 7 days, now 7 days is dramatic, it is.
That's what I thought.
Netflix destroy things every few hours. Containers in Netflix last 4 hours at most. They get destroyed and rebuilt. It's not that extreme. I'm not saying
They're not running the banking system, are they? Or your holidays, or your, air traffic control.
No.
So,
No,
Yeah, it's like,
well, you say that, but
started.
if Netflix goes down in my house, it's an issue.
Yeah, you get it.
And they have millions and millions of customers, so they are very business orientated. But they have 10 years of experience of doing this, so they can do that. They have well-proven processes and a culture that supports them. For getting started, the fact that you can build it once, automated, is a huge benefit. Then try and build it again. Then try and build it again. Having that gives you the ability to be more secure, because every time you rebuild it, you pull an image, or you pull code, or you pull packages from a repository, always getting the latest instance of those things. And the benefits are far-reaching.
And it's the known secure one, as opposed to the one that might have been half hacked or even hacked. So if the hackers have been in,
Yeah.
and they perpetrated some of their fraud, and they're starting to do bad things, what you're saying is, if after a week or whatever period of time you come along and just blast that out and throw it away and put a nice new clean image in,
Yep.
whatever they've got up to is now gone.
Yes, exactly. And again, hackers do put in a lot of effort, but it's effort versus reward. They're not going to keep going at something if every 7 days they have to start again from scratch.
Yeah. So as a deterrent, in some respects, assuming they could see that that was happening, which they probably would spot after a while.
But by that time, we've got all the checks and balances, the trust but verify,
Yeah.
you know, we've got all our secured IPs, we've got all the vulnerability management, we've got all the antivirus, we've got everything, so they won't get in anyway. But if they were.
You said security is often reactive. How can it more active and have more collaboration or training or?
Yeah. So in my experience, the best value I have got is teaching the developers to fish, kind of slightly mixing metaphors, but giving those 20% that I keep banging on about a bit more training. Now, I've been in cybersecurity 4 or 5 years. I've put a lot of effort in, got all the badges and certificates. They may want to continue down that road, but a lot of them are naturally nosy people anyway, and will go and learn some things. And if you create or curate some training services for those 20%, that will improve the quality of their code, and by association, the quality of code of the 80% that they're influencing.
So, yes, go ahead.
It's really a cultural question, but building on that. For developers who are working on safety critical systems, I get the impression they get safety. A lot of engineers understand safety, and it's sort of something.
Well, it's a prerequisite typically when you get to that type of system, yeah.
So what do you think we need to do to get that kind of culture into developers working on business systems in terms of security culture?
Again, it's the more proactive developers typically end up getting the harder roles, the harder jobs, and they have extra vetting, they have extra checks and balances, they get fished a little more, things like that. Having the same level of engagement with the 80% is going to be too difficult for a cybersecurity professional. There's not enough of us. Read any report, there's millions of spare vacancies going. Again, if you have a core that are working on this safety critical systems that are the shining light of developers, the best thing I can say is give them free capacity to help educate the rest of them. Learn from the best. I just came back from Norway and I went dog sledding. Huge fun, absolutely fantastic. But the lady that ran the experience had 115 huskies. Now, if you've ever seen 115 dogs, all hugely excitable to pull a sled, it is ear-shattering. The noise is amazing. But she said that there is a throughput. Dogs typically work for about 10 or 11 years. But the dog that is 10 or 11, they get put in a specific place in the line. Now, they're not pulling the hardest, they're not running the fastest, but they are keeping control of the other 4 dogs. And that analogy works, in my opinion, for developers.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, David?
Yeah, so Roy will probably tell you, we did some work with the IET in safety critical. They gave up, but we've stood the pace if anyone's into that space. So if your repository, and Mark didn't let on, but is with a firm, say your Red Hat IBM Ansible server was drastically out of date and unpatched, and that was your holy of holies for your infrastructure as code. As your role, what would your first thoughts be?
Burn it down and walk away, get another job. Again, if something like that has been running at risk for that long, I was shocked. Many years ago, I was talking to someone from a high street institution, and they were scouring eBay for old kit because they had some code that could only run on a specific architecture. Now, working for an institution that's 327 years old, I have empathy for that. When I joined 10 years ago, I was supporting a few systems that were tactical. That's the great phrase. This is tactical. We'll replace it in a couple of years. I was in a meeting yesterday, and one of those is still going. Again, it comes down to risk. We want to fix everything, but that's not possible. There's not enough of us. You have to prioritize. And again, you as a developer, as a system resilience engineer, whatever title you have these days, DevSecOps, you can only give your advice. At the end of the day, it comes down to the owner of the risk. And as Roy said, if you find the right owner in the business, it's about communication.
So
Don't go on there coding my 20,000 odd, 26,000 odd CVEs, because that's just too confusing. I typically approach it as how something happening to that service will impact revenue.
So if someone had hidden the fact that you had a breached, broken Ansible server by calling it the Red Hat server, what would your immediate reaction be?
Again, turn off the camera, because this is official. Raking them over the coals. Again, I mentioned that cloud security posture management is a huge trigger point for me. And one of the things that I pontificate about when I do a talk on it is inventory. You can't protect what you don't know about. So if someone is hiding something, a guy came in and did a pitch a few years ago, and they set something loose on their network, and someone was connecting their Bluetooth toothbrush to the network.
Why not? Yeah.
As a developer, I probably go, I never can do this. Developers are problem solvers.
Yeah.
A good developer is a good problem solver. If you put too many barriers, security or otherwise, in front of them, they spent more time trying to circumvent those than actually just applying and coordinating.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I've had a couple of other questions online, but before we go back to those, has anyone else in the room got anything they want to raise? No? Okay, should we have a quick look at these? We've got a couple here. I think so. This one I think you've covered already.
Outsourcing software development,
well,
what controls would you say? So outsourcing the whole development of software is becoming more and more popular. I was shocked to find a few years ago when I started getting involved with this type of thing that, well, if you outsource it, you get a product and it's typically a black box. You can't run your own penetration tests on it because you don't have the source code. The best you can negotiate is to have the code in an escrow account. Don't know if anyone else has experienced this, where whoever develops it, puts it in a third party, and if the original developers go bust, then the code gets released to you. That type of thing, it's all about the policies and the third party assurance that you put in place. This is slightly outside the DevSecOps, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. More importantly, if you're using packages that you're including in your own development, check the licenses. Someone once turned up and wanted access to see our systems because someone in the bank had used a package that in its terms and conditions said they can turn up at any time and see the kit that it's running on.
There we are.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Many people don't even think you need to read all of this, and it can come and bite you.
The more modern dependency checkers will also pull out the types of licenses as well.
Yeah, and that is a good point. So open source isn't just a free lunch.
It's not necessarily shareware or
Yeah.
freeware as it used to be in the past.
Yeah, you need to be very, very cautious, especially if you're in an industry where maybe you're writing software for customers, either to sell or as part of a service. You need to look at those distribution rights. That could really come and bite. So there's a question here that I think we had touched on, talking about selective building, breaking of builds.
Yeah, so hardcore API keys and secrets. What is your opinion on selective build breaking based on criticality? Of course. So when you start turning that dial from audit to active, you want to also set a threshold of what breaks a build very, very high.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to capture the 860 CVEs last year that we saw at the far right of the chart. You don't want to be putting it in and anything with a CVE stops a build. say will make you very, very unpopular. So start high, and as these get remediated, because although those figures were scary, some or all of them may not actually apply to you. So you may get down to 6s and 7s before the alarm bells start going off, but you don't know until you start trying. But be cautious.